Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 157 of Dial the Gate. My name is David Reed, Stargate writer and SG-1, Atlantis and Universe executive producer. Paul Mullie is joining us for this episode. Before we bring him in, if you enjoy the Stargate franchise and you like particularly the content that Dial the Gate is bringing every week, it would mean a great deal to me if you click the like button. I know, every YouTube video asks you to do this, but it really does help with our exposure to other Stargate fans who haven't discovered us yet and helps us grow our audience. Please also consider sharing this video with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click that subscribe icon. And giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops. And you'll get my notifications on any last-minute guest changes because these talent are working and, things pop up. And clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few weeks on the Dial the Gate and gateworld.net YouTube channels. As this is a live stream, I have a moderating team standing by in the YouTube live chat. So anyone who is joining us live can submit their questions to Paul. I'll go through and pick the best of the ones for the end of the show, and we'll go from there. But until then, he is all mine. Mr. Paul Mullie, writer and executive producer, Stargate. Sir, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi. You're welcome. You're welcome. I don't know if I spoke over you when you were doing your intro. You said 157 episodes, and I went, "What?" I made some.
Yes, I didn't hear it
because I was surprised. I had no clue that it was 157 episodes. That's crazy.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really privileged that the show has continued, and we've got folks like you who are kind enough to come in and continue to share stories on this franchise that just will not seem to die.
No.
So
in one way or another.
Right, exactly. Amazon is evidently taking pitches from a number of different sources right now for a potential next Stargate, be it a film or a TV show. We don't really know yet. All that we know is that they're working on something, and sooner or later something's going to happen. And before we really get into the thick of everything that I want to talk about with you and your career and with your Stargate life, what do you think the next Stargate needs to bring to the table if they're going to do another version of it?
Yeah, that's a tough question because, you need a gate.
This is true.
If it's going to be called Stargate, let's start with that basic
round thing.
That's really the show, right? That was it all along. It was this circle, and you stepped into it, and you went to other worlds, and then all sorts of other things happened. You went in time, and all kinds of craziness happened. But that's the basic premise, right? So you obviously need that. I don't see how you do a show without that. The next biggest thing for me is the characters. So that's a tougher one. Do you have to have Jack O'Neill and Daniel Jackson? Right? Are they integral to the idea? Are they sort of baked in to the very idea? You did not necessarily. Somebody else could, someone with a different name, an archaeologist with a different name could know about, but it's going to have, does it have to have Egyptian connections? The Stargate could be something else in this. It's pretty open, I would say. I mean, the basic, because we stuck with the premise of the movie, which was Jack O'Neill was a guy who had lost his son, and and those characters started from the same place that they started from the movie, right? Like they or continued sort of theoretically in our minds from that storyline. So we kept that, but is it necessary for Stargate? I don't know. You need a gate. You need a team of people going through the gate and having adventures. They could be anybody, really. It could be. I also think a key element for me was the fact that the show was contemporary. That these were people living in, at the time, the early 2000s, now in the 2020s, dealing with the problems of today, but also then going to other worlds. Because that was, I think, what always made Stargate stand out for me, aside from character stuff, was the fact that it was contemporary. It wasn't set in the future, unlike Star Trek and Star Wars, and Star Wars is set millions of years in the past, apparently. But
it's futuristic.
That idea that, futuristic, exactly.
Yeah.
we could have that balance of going to other worlds and seeing futuristic things and spaceships and stuff, but grounded in the contemporary world. For me, that was a kind of a key element of the show. I guess, again, you don't theoretically need to do that, but why wouldn't you? From a production standpoint, it certainly makes the show a lot easier to make. It made the show a lot easier to make for us because we could tell Earth stories, which didn't require us to build huge elaborate sets. You know, we could just go on location and see cars driving around. They didn't have to be future cars.
Didn't have to hide them. Yeah.
They could just be regular. And it also just, I think, made it in a way more relatable for the audience because the characters lived in the same world ostensibly that they lived in, except they just knew something special that was kind of hidden from everybody else. But so I think it was a door in for a lot of people. And maybe for people who aren't maybe such hardcore sci-fi fans who don't necessarily want to see a show that's set in space all the time, you know, that it had that grounding aspect to it. Again, does that mean the other Stargate has to have that? I don't know what it has to have to work. I don't pretend to sort of know what makes people like shows, right? Like there's a weird alchemy that happens when you're trying to create a TV show. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It mostly revolves around the characters, you know, and their interactions, creating cool characters that people are going to relate to. And then obviously putting them in crazy situations. That's what sci-fi does, right? So, you know, you need a core group of people that the audience is going to relate to and going to want to see week after week or hour after hour if they're streaming it and watching it and binging it. But these are basic concepts, right? Like these aren't, any science fiction show needs that. Any show needs that. So as far as the Stargate goes, I would say it needs a gate and a team of likable, relatable characters to go through that gate and have adventures. Other than that, it's pretty wide open, I would say.
There is a degree of whimsy about it as well. It doesn't take itself too seriously.
Sure.
Most of it doesn't. But sometimes it can elevate itself to that level, as with Heroes or some of these other stories where it's like, yeah, we're talking about some pretty major issues here. We're going to have to kind of put some of our silliness to the side for this one, as you know, to get the audience to buy into this thing. That we're taking this guy and this wraith and we're transforming him into a human against his will. You know, to see if we can defang our enemies. You know, there's the show. I think the show's ability to modulate its intensity enables me as an audience member to enjoy it better than something like Doctor Who. I can't stand Doctor Who. There are some.
Say Battlestar Galactica personally, because that was
or at the other end of that, so intense. You know, I mean, both of those, even Doctor Who,
the other end of the spectrum, exactly.
Episodes that are brilliant of it that I must admit are fantastic science fiction, but the core principle of it, I can't hang my hat on.
Right. I think I agree with you. You said it correctly when you said it's our ability to modulate that, because it was sort of going back and forth, right? There was a rhythm between the seriousness and the levity of the show that made it work for me. Like Battlestar, for example, a lot of people love that show. And I'm not dissing the show, but for me personally, it was just so relentlessly serious about itself that I need to know that the people making the show know that they're making a show, but not in a way that's obvious and ruins it for me. Just that they understand that, you know, we're not curing cancer here, right? We're making it, this is entertainment. Yes, it can be serious, and obviously, like Universe, for example, was a much more serious iteration of Stargate, which was fun to do because we had done a lot more. Not that there wasn't humor in Universe too. You know, for me, the humor it would be a key element for me to enjoy the show. Does that necessarily mean it has to have it? Is it baked in again to the Stargate idea? From my point of view, yes, but I'm one person, right? They're trying to reach a large audience, and so I would like it if they had a little bit of humor. I think I would say that about any show, though, right? Like any, especially science fiction, because it can be so heavy, because it can be dark, because it can be dealing with some pretty scary concepts. It always helps, and it comes back to making the characters relatable. If they're funny with each other, if they understand. The circumstance isn't funny. The circumstance is deadly serious and scary, but the characters themselves can see it with a little bit of humor. It just makes them more relatable, and at the end makes the show better, whatever show we're talking about.
Right, because we're with them, we're experiencing it with them, alongside them, ideally, hopefully.
Right.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably a key element too. Now that you bring that up, I mean, I would want to see that in a new version. I have no idea what's going to happen with this. I do know that from our point of view, it's going to be frustrating because I guarantee you they're going to spend way more money than we ever even got close to spending, even in current dollars, even if you compare it to
even with inflation.
They're going to make it a tentpole thing. At least I assume that's what they're going to do. That's how I would approach it too, which means they're going to throw a lot of money at it.
But will it have substance?
Well,
that's
who knows? But they'll be allowed to do stuff. So from our point of view, when I say our point of view, I'm talking about me and Joseph and Brad and Robert. We're going to look at it and go, fuck, it's only we. Sorry,
no, you're fine.
Am I allowed to swear on this show?
Later you are. Later into the hour. It's an advertising thing.
But we are going to, look at it and go, I wish we had that. We should have had that amount of money to do. We could have done some pretty impressive things too. But you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, you can throw a ton of money at the screen. If people don't like the characters, no one's going to care.
Exactly.
So who knows? It's an interesting challenge. I'm curious to see what happens. I don't have a dog in the fight, so it's other than my own sort of idea of what I like to see in science fiction. I'm just a viewer at that point. So who knows? We'll see.
I would think that you would have a vested interest in also preserving the canon of what you created, rather than them coming in and saying, you know what, this Stargate thing, it's not like a Star Wars or a Star Trek. We can blank slate it, and no one will complain.
Yeah, I'm maybe not the best defender of the canon out there.
Okay.
I maybe this is heresy to say this, but I don't. Oh my, sorry, my cat is coming in through the.
No, it's okay. Cats can cat.
I can hear him scratching at the door because he's irritated that I had him locked out. Now he's like clawing him. He's like, "What are you doing? Why are you?"
Hello.
This is Freddie.
It's Freddie.
Say hello, Freddie. He's like,
it's
"What?"
Beautiful.
Anyway, you go away now. He's going to irritate me through this whole thing now.
Of course.
Now he's in the locked room with me. So
that's funny.
I forgot that he has his own little door to get in.
That's funny. Yeah.
I'm sorry. What were you saying?
We're talking about the canon.
Oh, yeah, the canon. Okay, so the problem is the canon is massive, right? It's massive.
Yeah.
Like this was part of my process preparing for this because I haven't talked about, I don't do a lot of interviews, so I haven't kept up. I haven't constantly talked about Stargate for the last 10 years. So there's a gap there for me. So I'm like, I should look up some of this stuff and remind myself what we did. It was like the last time we talked about Universe, that was much easier because Universe was A, later, closer in my memory, and B, much smaller. There's only 2 seasons. I can sort of encapsulate all of Universe in my head at one time or close to it. Stargate, I can't even come close. I started to look through it and I was like, oh my God, like I had sort of forgotten, honestly, the scope of the show.
Yeah. You have to take it one bite at a time.
Because when you're making it, you don't think about that, right?
No.
It's like the next episode, what's the season finale? Like, okay, what's the opening for the next season? It's like, you're in this process, you're not thinking about, but then when it's over, you look over your shoulder and there's 10 years of episodes behind you and an incredible variety of ideas and villains and, the canon is massive. So,
you guys did 120 shows in 3 years.
Yeah,
that is insane. That's insane by any modern margin.
It's not really done anymore. No, it's not done anymore. And we can talk about that because Stargate really, I think we've brought this up before, but it really sort of straddled a huge transformation in how television is made, how television is sold, how television is watched. It really did start in one era and end in a completely different era and survived through that, which I am impressed by that too. Just the fact that we survived those changes. But yeah, I mean, I almost feel like you have to start with a bit of a blank slate in terms of the canon because it's just too much baggage. It's just too much to
I understand.
to bring with you if you're starting a new show. Like I think people have got to give them that. You've got to say, okay, look, this exists. Stargate SG-1 and Universe and Atlantis are going to continue to exist. People can watch it whenever they want to watch it. This will still have the name Stargate and it'll be different. And that's okay. Like, I want to say it's okay for it to be different. It's okay for it. One of the things I don't like about, some of like Star Trek and Star Wars and a lot of these more recent sort of reiterations of it is they kind of tend to wallow in their own stuff. They don't move forward, especially Star Wars. Like I just, it drove me crazy when Star Wars started to kind of come back. And after the episodes 1, 2, and 3, which I pretend don't exist anyway, they didn't go forward. They continued to rehash. It's like Rogue One and Solo, and
well, even the sequel trilogy. It's like the Empire didn't go away. The First Order just
exactly.
It's like its place. Okay, like where did they come from?
Yeah. Time for a new villain. Why not?
Yeah.
Why does it always have to be the Empire? Maybe there's a villain. I mean, they have alien creatures in that universe. Come up with something else. Move forward. You've got this incredible canvas, this dedicated audience and tons of resources. Do something with it other than rehash the same stuff. And so I kind of would feel that way a little bit about Stargate as well. It's like, sure, I want them to be respectful and everything, but honestly, I want to see new stuff.
Right.
There's science fiction. It's especially that freaking round gate. It's the most open concept you can possibly imagine in science fiction, right? You can go in, you can just do anything you want. And so I personally would want to see them sort of go forward and not just rehash the same stuff.
I think that they can do it. It's interesting because there's this, if you want to tell Earth-based stories and you want to tell Stargate stories, you can either reset the discovery of the gate, or you have to maintain its continuity of where it's been throughout our history in terms of what you guys established. It's only at specific locations throughout history. And so if we're going to move it forward in time, we're going to have to either change its location up or and just acknowledge, O'Neill and some of these other players that were part of the history. But that's been 20 years now. Those guys, a lot of them are just retired. And then tell a story from there, or hit the big red reset button. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I
personally would hit the big red reset button.
You yourself would.
Yeah, I would. Again, I don't see it as being disrespectful to the canon or anything like that. I see it as people wanting to see new stories. That's all. And the canon it's almost like if you wanted to start Stargate 20 years in the future from where we started it, like you said, all that stuff is still there, which means you have to service it. And it's just too much.
Yeah.
There's Asgard and Anubis and
all the technology we had been given, what are the stakes?
Too much.
Yeah.
It's maybe I'm saying the wrong thing here, but I personally would like it to be like Stargate in the creative sense of, like you said, having humor, having relatable characters who are contemporary that people get. Those are the key elements. The canon evolved because we were telling stories with these people in this gate. We didn't set out to create a canon, right? We set out to create good episodes, and over time that formed a canon. But that's not why we made the show, right? To have this huge mythology. It just evolved out of doing episodes of television that were good episodes of television. Yeah. So I would want them to take, whoever's doing the new Stargate, I would want them to take the same approach.
It's interesting, though. I mean, it's kind of like a snake eating its tail. I continually come across new Stargate fans, even someone that I told this recently with Andy Frizzell, haven't seen since kindergarten. At a reunion, and he found out what I do, and he had started watching Stargate just a few days before, and now he's on like season 8, and he loves it. So you may have been doing it with the intention of creating great television. You left a canon as a result, and that's what a lot of people keep on coming back for again and again. So it's kind of like, I can understand where they don't want it scrubbed, because a lot of people have the mindset of whatever is currently on, that is what exists. And
Yeah.
if you're not in service
Okay.
to what came before, then that is considered dead. And I think that those are frankly too rigid. Even though I may agree with the perception, I think that perception is frankly too rigid. That because it's not currently being serviced on television, it must be dead. You know, whatever the canon is.
I agree. I mean, like I said, that it's not like the shows are going to disappear.
Right.
It's not like they're changing the timeline and Stargate SG-1 with the character that we wrote, with the actors that we worked with, suddenly disappears and doesn't exist anymore. It's still out there. You can still watch it. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, Star Trek did this too, right? They rebooted
the Kelvin timeline.
Yeah, and it's a new timeline. And so does that mean the original series is gone? No, I watch it all the time. It's still on TV every day.
The merchandise still sells really well.
I turn on cable. So, and I still like it. I still enjoy it. So I don't see it as being that big of a problem.
Yeah. And in that particular situation, they went out of their way to reference an alternate timeline was made. And if Amazon does some similar in terms of like hanging a lantern on it, like the writer's term, you know, like acknowledge it and now moving on. Yeah, I could be convinced to accept that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know if they will. I don't know. It's a tough problem. Yeah. It's a tough problem to say, okay, you're redoing this franchise. You know, how do you want to do it? I mean, that's a long meeting. So
that's many meetings.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just hope it's good. Yeah. Right. I just hope they don't. My fear is that they pump a lot of money into something and it comes out feeling kind of hollow. Because I've seen that happen a lot of times before, with not with Stargate, but with other things, and not necessarily with reboots, but just with science fiction and genre stuff in general. Right. There's this kind of attitude now since Game of Thrones that you got to go big. You got to go big. It's the only way you can succeed, especially with these streamers who have apparently bottomless pits full of money that they can dig into. But it doesn't necessarily translate into something that I want to watch just because it's big budget and has huge scope and stuff like that. So that would be my concern more than anything else. Just make me want to spend time with the characters, and the rest will work itself out.
And I agree. One of the concerns that I am continually seeing raised, and I'm interested in your take on this, in the communications that come out about these new programming. And I will just delineate this down to say that there are many fans that are concerned that whoever creates the next thing, activism will be more important than entertainment. Oh. And I think that it's like if you go straight back to the original Star Trek, messages were always important, but they don't supersede the entertainment. Right. And you're seeing arguably a lot more of that now because everyone is using everything as a platform to talk to someone else about what they think is most important. Where do you see that line? I'm old school, I guess, or just old. I just want good stories. You know, if they service some kind of agenda for something you want to say about the world, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's still got to be a good story. I think the mistake is that, well, if we just plug in, you know, these certain tropes that are popular right now and these types of characters and this level of diversity and whatever, then we're hitting all the buttons and it's going to work. And it's like, no, it still has to be a good story. You can do all that, but it still has to be a good story. In service of story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, I would just come back to the same stuff, like the same ideas of what it takes to write a good story. It doesn't mean you can't have all those elements, but they themselves don't make it good, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. And sci-fi is the perfect genre for that. Sci-fi
it's always been that way.
to make you think, you know, you can turn it on and turn off your brain or turn your brain on even further.
No, that's why Rod Serling made the Twilight Zone, because he could write political stories that would not be allowed on any other television at the time, but because it was science fiction, people were like, nah, it's not real, so who cares? Right. So he could deal with issues of the day, you know, and take them on and frankly get away with it in a way that other people probably wouldn't have been able to do in straight drama.
Yeah.
That's a good thing for science fiction to do. So there's no reason for it not to do that, but it still needs to be a good story.
I think that that's its strength. Yeah, telling good stories and making us think. I don't think science fiction is worthy of the name if it doesn't do both.
Right.
So, any current projects that we need to be aware of that you've been fiddling with?
Not in the film and television industry. I'm trying to transition into writing novels. Actually, I have a novel that I've written, and then right now I'm trying to find an agent and a publisher for it. So yeah, that's what I'm working on right now. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. It's a very different world, and it's a world I know nothing about and have no connections to whatsoever. So I'm kind of starting from scratch.
Is it sci-fi?
Yeah, it's sci-fi. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still sci-fi.
Okay.
I could not write a straight drama. No,
I think you could.
I think in science fiction tropes, that's how I've always been creatively. It was my first love, if you will, in terms of like what I like to watch, what I like to read and stuff like that. It's not that I don't like other stuff, but I always come back to science fiction. And the idea that I had was actually an evolution of an idea that was originally a pitch that Brad actually never got. It was for The Outer Limits. We pitched The Outer Limits. This is before we were on Stargate, before we'd ever met Brad and Robert. And I told him the pitch. I think I might have told you this, but I told him the pitch years later when we were on Stargate. He's like, I would have bought that, but he never saw it because it went through Trilogy, which was the production company, and they turned us down. It's very different from that original pitch, but that was the seed, if you will. Yeah, that eventually became my novel. So I'm just trying to sell the novel right now, which is not a super fun experience, but even just getting people to try and get. Of
course. Can you share the title with us?
The title right now, it's a working title. I'd say it's called Never Seen Rain. It's a what's the term? Mid-distant future. So it's basically set in a future where we have colonized the solar system, but not yet don't yet have faster than light travel. So haven't gone to other stars yet. We're just on the cusp of that. And it's set in that world. The idea for me was to talk about what it would be like for colonizing space for ordinary people. So you're past the stage where it's just astronauts and super elite engineers and scientists. Now it's like colonies. And if you think about it, if there's a colony in space, that means there's chefs and
whole ecosystems like that, human society,
living out there, and what it would be like, and the basic premise is that it would be an incredibly alienating experience. It's kind of dark, that it would essentially sort of drive people crazy to be in space, that we're not at this stage in our evolution really ready for that kind of, or it's actually asking the question, are we really ready for that sort of thing? So that's kind of the world that the novel is set in.
I can't imagine having children who had never seen rain.
Yeah, that's basically the concept.
Wow.
People who have first, maybe second or third generation of people who've never been to Earth, who've never lived on Earth, and what would that be like?
Yeah, how would we even relate to someone like that?
Right.
It's interesting to tell stories about some of these people. Some of these stories are just completely out there. We were talking with Mike Dopood about he was playing a cannibal,
right?
Like a pretty straightforward, suit and tie, cannibal. How do you relate to that kind of a person? How do you go there? So some people have to in terms of the work that they do.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Any updates on the potential next chapter of Dark Matter? I know some fans have been asking about that.
Now, Joe knows more about that than me. I think he said something on his blog about he had a meeting with Jay, and they were talking about, because it's moved to CW something or other, another streaming service. I've lost track of all the streaming services.
Me too.
I actually lost my wallet, and I had to cancel my credit card. It's a good way to find out how many subscriptions you have if you've forgotten, because they start emailing you like,
they do indeed want their money.
I'm like, I forgot about that one. Jeez, I'm gonna let that one die.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was the only good thing about losing my wallet, because I had a lot of subscriptions. But yeah, so it's on a new service now, and I guess if it gets some traction in there, maybe there's the idea that, because they're apparently looking for content, and
hey, all right.
Yeah, and he talked about the possibility of another comic book, but I don't know how realistic that is either. Um, I don't know. Joe would have a better idea of how. I mean, there's always possibilities, but the question is how real is it, right? Like
Right.
how, and I don't really know.
Well, there is a fandom there. There's a fervent fandom for it, and as long as there is interest, there is hope.
Yeah, exactly.
So, absolutely. How did you guys tell us about the journey that led you into pitching Stargate? How did you guys start your collaboration? And tell me
Has
about.
Joe not told you any of Joe hasn't told you
He
this
has,
story?
but I want to hear it from you. I want to hear about Bad Movie Night, and I want to
It
hear
comes out
about
different.
your take of it, because we never really get to hear from you, and
Uh,
I think the quiet ones have some stories
well,
to tell.
yeah, right. Here's how I remember it. I don't know how he told it to you, but I mean, if I'm going right, so first of all, he started working in animation, and
Yes.
he got me working animation, but that I kind of see that as a separate stream that eventually stopped because we started doing other things. The live action, the steps that took us to Stargate didn't really involve the animation stream, if you will. The way I remember it, and I know for a fact what got me into it was I had an idea for a movie. Uh, I know exactly where I was. I was on the bus. I was driving down. I was going from Beaconsfield in the West Island of Montreal downtown. I think I was going to school. I think I was going to McGill at the time, the University of McGill, and or McGill University, I guess it'd be called. And I had seen a movie. I don't know if he's told you this. I had seen a movie called just recently before that bus ride called, I think it was called Echo Park, with Susan Day and Tom Hulse. It's not a science fiction movie. It's got nothing to do with anything except there's a scene in this movie where Tom Hulse is delivering pizzas to a like biker gang hangout, and he gets kind of roughed up by the bikers. And for some reason, I have no idea why, I'm on the bus and this idea popped into my head of a guy who had to deliver pizza in a kind of an urban dystopia of the future where, he's constantly under attack, but he's got to get the pizzas through. And at the time, Domino's had this thing where if the pizza's not there in 30 minutes, it's free. I don't think they do that anymore.
I don't think so either.
I think they gave up on that. I think they had to give away too many free pizzas. Eventually they gave up on that. But I literally, the log line of the movie popped into my head, and it was, if he's not there in 30 minutes, he's dead. And so I just had this image of this poster and the log line and the guy. I even know who was in the movie in my mind. It was, I'm blanking on his name now. Bruce Campbell from Evil Dead. Yeah, he was, you got to imagine the younger version of Bruce Campbell at the time. This was, in the, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s. And anyway, I had this idea, and Joe was already writing cartoons and writing scripts of his own, just trying to sell stuff. And I had never written a script, and I pitched him the idea of, and it was called Pizza Man 2017. Ironically, 2017 seemed like the distant future
Right.
time. If he's not there in 30 minutes, he's dead. That's really all I had. That was it. And he was like, that's a great idea. You should write it. And so I tried, and I wrote maybe like 20 pages, and I was like, I have no clue what I'm doing. Up till that point, writing for me was writing short stories. I'd always written. I liked creative writing. I liked doing it, but I had never written a script.
A whole different beast.
I didn't know what I was doing. I had no clue. So I gave it to. So he's like, "Well, give it to me. I'll look at it." And so then he started working on it, and then he sent it back to me, and we just sent it back and forth until eventually we had a script, and that was how we started working together. We had been friends, and we were both writers, but we hadn't really done anything together, and so that was it. And then it kind of kicked around the sort of Montreal scene. I remember this director got his hands on it. He was like, I'm going to make this movie. Of course he didn't. And then he eventually got it into the hands of these producers who also didn't make it, but they eventually got it into the hands of, eventually the guy who became our agent, Carl Lieberman, who worked for a company called The Characters, or works, he still does.
Yes.
In Toronto. And Rob Cooper, it turned out, we didn't know this at the time, was also a client of the Characters. In fact, I think his father-in-law started the company. So there was a connection there that we didn't know about at the time. We suddenly had an agent. He liked the script. He's like, oh, okay, I like the script with you guys. We could make a deal, and I could represent you, and I could try to get you TV work. And so we said, yeah, sure. And then I don't know how much time passed, a couple of years or something. I don't remember exactly. We were working in animation. And then he got us work on sort of a teen sitcom called Student Bodies. This was like sort of late 90s. And so we did that together. Joe and I did that together. We wrote that show. It was a lot of fun. And right when that ended, we were working on a few other things. And then we got a call one day saying, hey, do you guys want to pitch for Stargate? And I'd never seen the show, but I'd seen the movie. So I watched some episodes of the show. I think they sent us some videotapes. That's, again, how long ago this was. It wasn't even DVDs yet. At that
VHS.
Point, videotapes.
Let's pause if you don't mind. At this point, you had already had movie night with Stargate, so you had seen it prior.
Mm-hmm.
What was your impression of the feature film?
I liked it. I thought it was a little cheesy, but I liked it. I wasn't expecting very much from it. It had not gotten particularly good reviews, but I'm a science fiction guy, right? I'm always going to give science fiction the benefit of the doubt. It never quite lives up to what I hope it's going to be. Most science fiction movies don't, but I appreciate the effort. I appreciate that somebody's out there trying to tell these types of stories. So no, yeah, I like I said, it had not been, to me at least, it had not been sold as this awesome movie. So I had, not the highest expectations for it. But which always sort of changes how I perceive a movie. But I liked it. And when the show came on, I didn't watch the show, but right away, I mean, remember how I said that frickin' circle is an incredibly open-ended storytelling device? I knew that when they were like, oh, they made a show about it. I'm like, well, yeah, that's a good idea for a TV show. Like
that's gonna work.
Yeah, that's a great idea for a TV show. I didn't know all about the Goa'uld and all the mythology that they had created. I just knew they had a thing that you stepped through and went to other planets, which to me was cool. And so we watched a few episodes, and I think we told this story where they gave us the Bible, and it was like this thick
already,
this giant binder. And this was after 3 seasons, not 10 seasons. It was already, and I'm like, we can't read this. So I skimmed it, and but mainly we watched episodes and just tried to hear the voices of the characters and feel the tone of the show. And then we pitched. And I think the original pitch, the first pitch that they liked and that we turned into an outline was Scorched Earth, I believe. I think that was the first one we wrote. And then Window of Opportunity, I think, was also in that group of pitches. And I think that was the second one that we wrote, even though it wound up being produced first. And one of the things, I just watched Window of Opportunity for this. I went back and I was like, can I watch any episodes? I'm like, there's too many. I can't watch all the season ending cliffhangers. I watched 20 episodes. So I was like, I'm going to watch that one because that was the first one. And I watch it, and it's a very funny episode. And I think that's key because we talked about humor before. And when I saw the pilot, Children of the Gods, right? The line that stood out for me most, all this crazy stuff is happening, but I remember when O'Neill says, come with us. And Teal'c says, I've got nowhere to go. And he says, for this, you can stay at my place, right? Or something to that effect. Right away, I knew, okay, I get it. That I get. I get that kind of dialogue. I like that kind of dialogue. Crazy stuff's happening. People are getting shot at with lasers and stuff, but he's like, for this, you can stay at my house. It's a funny line. It sells the character. It tells me everything I need to know, honestly, about that character in that moment. And so it's like, okay, I heard that, right? And so it's like, okay, we're going to write that, or try to, we were new. And what's amazing as well, if you watch Window of Opportunity, the reason that episode works is because it was a role reversal episode where O'Neill and Teal'c had to do the thinking, or at least more than their share of the thinking that they normally did.
Which is funny.
And it was funny. But what's interesting about that is that it showed how well that show was already developed, even after 3 seasons, because for us to go in and pitch a role, the roles had to already be so established that it would be funny to see them reversed, right? So there was already a foundation there that we worked off of. And I never really thought of it that way, but when I watched it, I was like, it's kind of interesting that as first-time writers, we came in and pitched this kind of an episode, and that they were okay with that. And that, Rick and Chris played it so brilliantly. I mean, it was pretty cool that we got to that was our door in. And I liked the episode. I liked it. It was funny. I know it's a fan favorite to this day, which is pretty amazing because, going back to what we were talking about, what makes good science fiction? I mean, it's not an original concept, right? Like it's Groundhog Day. We're ripping off Groundhog Day. Everybody knows we're ripping off Groundhog Day.
It works because of the knowledge of Groundhog Day, though.
Yeah.
You can watch them without it, but having seen that film, it's a more enriching experience.
Yeah, I guess so. I hope so. But my point is, the concept is fine. It's neither here nor there. It's all in the execution, and the execution is in how the characters interact, and that's why it's funny, and that's why people like it to this day, even though it's not the biggest episode, or it's not. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a lot of the other Stargate stuff that we did over the years. It's a pretty simple, small story. But it was funny and relatable, and for that reason, people still like it to this day, which is incredible to me because it was, like I said, the second script we ever wrote and the first one of ours that got produced.
I remember watching it and laughing so hard. It had been so long since I'd laughed so hard at the television set, and we get to the end of it, and O'Neill says, I know the grief that you're going through. I know what it's like. And Malachi says, you can't. And O'Neill lashes out at them. I know. And I would never go through that again. And the entire series, I think, is exemplified in that moment because we can have the hysterics of the situation and also the poignancy of two men coming together through an understanding of what it is like to suffer and what a person can be driven to do to stop the suffering.
Right.
And it worked.
So there's two elements there that are working, right? And that make good, I would just say, you could say television or movies or storytelling in general. There's humor and there's heart, right? That's it. Everything else is bells and whistles, right? Yeah, you want adventure and you want surprises and twists, but what you really want are those other two things, because those are the things that make it relatable to people and make them want to spend time with the characters and go through the adventures, right? For me, it's so absolutely key to science fiction specific, especially to have a little bit of humor and some heart, right? Have just this kind of emotional core that grounds everything. So it's not just crazy stuff happening in space. And it's right. It doesn't have to be huge. It's one moment, right? It's one moment at the end of the episode, but it's a real moment. It feels real. It feels genuine, and it causes an emotional resonance in the viewer, and that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it proves that, it just reinforces that everything that could potentially be working with those characters is, because you can do a role reversal of all of those archetypes in this episode, and it still holds up because the performances are so genuine and the writing is strong.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a great way to start our run on Stargate. I didn't realize that it would sort of resonate as long as it has at the time. But great. I'm very glad it did, and I'm very proud of it.
What about Scorched Earth? We had, I think your original treatment for it ended a little bit darker, like them not finding their home world. Joe had talked about, we didn't actually have a plan on them. Oh, hey, look at this. We've actually found another planet out there, and hey, it's in Karen's.
Right. I think the original, I think the aliens, or the robot who's caretaking the aliens, just sacrifices them.
Wow.
In the original, I think that's what happens.
That makes sense.
I can't remember exactly. That was the first pitch, though. That was the original that was our first attempt to pitch Stargate. It was the first thing we wrote as a pitch. Wow. And then they got us to write an outline based on that pitch. And then then we wrote the script. It was kind of a little bit like a proving process along the way. Yeah. I always liked, and I think we may have revisited this in Stargate and other sort of thematically. I always like the idea of a civilization that's gone, but it's been preserved in some format.
Yeah.
there's a sort of poignancy to that. Like one of my all-time favorites, Next Generation episodes, is the one where Picard lives a whole life on this planet, and it turns out that it's just kind of
the inner light.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful episode, right? And it's kind of got that theme to it, and I always liked that idea in science fiction. I always found it kind of poignant and sad, and it's probably why we wrote the sad version,
right?
Originally, because that's kind of how I think of those stories. But I was just glad that they liked it. I mean, honestly, I know that Rob, like later, because Rob and Brad read the script, I think they were literally going on a golfing trip because they had just finished season 3. And I think they were a bit worried because Jonathan had left. Correct. And they didn't really have that many other writers, if any. I don't remember exactly how many writers they had that had survived at that point. So it was the two of them, and they were like, we got 22 episodes of television we got to make starting in January. This was like in November. And he remember he told me he read the script and he looked at Brad and he was like, okay, yeah, this is going to help. Like,
I think we're going to be okay with these
good
guys.
News. They were happy with it. And I'm glad they were. We had I think I said we had worked on Student Bodies, and we had then went on to one other show. I forget exactly. I think it was Big Wolf on Campus. Yeah. And they wanted to fire us because they didn't want to fire us. They wanted us to take a pay cut because we were too expensive. This is by late 90s Montreal standards. And we were like, no, because in our minds we had pitched to, I don't know if they had actually accepted the pitch yet. But I literally, in my mind, it was literally like the next day we quit this one show, and then we got the call to be on Stargate, or at least to write the script. I forget exactly how it played out, but it was like perfect timing for us because we were just kind of losing our traction in one part of the television business, and it was like this door opened.
Yeah, when God closes one door,
it was, and I literally, the way I remembered it was the next day, which maybe is me writing a more dramatic version of the past in my own mind, but that's how I mean, you'd have to ask Joe, but if he remembers it that way. But it was literally like, okay, we're out of this. This is kind of a dead end. Oh, here we go. We're going to Vancouver.
And 14 television seasons.
Right. Which of course we didn't know at the time.
Didn't know at the time, but an extraordinary body of work. Yeah. One might wonder how one could sustain that over the course of,
you don't think about it. Think about it. There's no way. You don't sit there and go, how do we write 10 seasons? Nobody does that. You think about the next episode.
Right.
And I've said this before, writing and producing television, it's a pipeline, right? Like once material starts flowing through that pipeline, you've got deadlines, you've got your broadcast schedule. Then you're backing into a post-production schedule. So you're backing into a production schedule, and you keep going back, and you can't violate any of those. You've got no window to like fool around with that. It's like once that process starts, because money is being spent.
Correct. It's a lot of money.
So it's like, you don't think, you barely look around. You're like, okay, we got to write another episode. Then we got to write it. And you're breaking stories, you're producing, you're going to set, and it's a lot of work, but your nose is to the grindstone. You don't think about the big picture of how many episodes or how many seasons are we going to do or anything. You kind of think about that when the season's over. You obviously hope for a pickup, as you're approaching the end of every season. We started knowing we had at least up till season 6 or season 5.
Right.
That was when we went off Showtime. But so actually, I guess we knew we had season 4. I'm not sure if we knew we had season 5 yet. It
was pretty soon thereafter, but yeah.
I forget. But it became dicey later because, everyone knows that in season 7, 8, 9, 10, every season was like, this is the last one.
Right, exactly.
No, you're coming back.
Season 10, okay. Season 11, we can write sign some contract. Oh, nope, we cut it. Yeah. It's like, seriously?
So like we went in there just thinking we're going to write a couple episodes of a show, and who knows? And but the premise was good. Yeah. Like I said, the premise is incredibly open-ended, and there was major talent there in Brad and Robert that were already there on the ground, ready to take our ideas and go even further with them, and so it just worked out. Like I said, it just so happened that we weirdly got connected with this agent who happened to be Rob Cooper's agent. Does any of this happen if any of those little pieces don't fall into place? If I'm not on the bus thinking about a pizza delivery man, I didn't watch, what was it called? Echo Park, which is a movie that nobody's heard of. But I remember it. I remember it for this simple reason, because it started that whole weird chain of events. So I don't know. It's like when you look back on stuff and how did that happen? And you're like people ask me, how did you get started in television? It's like a weird series of accidents happened. Yeah. To be honest with you, I don't really know how else to put it. But I don't want to be too self-deprecating here. You have to be good, right? Like when the door opens and you walk through the door, okay, you've been given an opportunity.
You have to be ready.
You have to deliver, right? So, I mean, Joe and I wrote good scripts. The door opened for us and we wrote good scripts, and Brad and Robert were smart enough to recognize what that brought to the table. And they said, yeah, come on board. And we continued to do that. And which made the show live and breathe for as long as it did, right? All of us continued to do that. So it's luck, but it's also taking advantage of the luck when it happens. So it's a weird combination. I don't really have, so people ask me, how do you get started or whatever? And I'm like, I don't know. The only advice I would ever give to anybody who wants to be a writer is you got to write. You got to write stuff and you got to put your material out there, because you don't know which weird accidental thing is going to result in you getting somewhere with it. So that's the best.
Melinda Snodgrass said, George R. R. Martin told her once, don't hoard your silver bullet.
Yeah, exactly. So exactly.
You've got an idea.
Stuff, put it out there and hope for the best, because like in our case, it was a weird series of accidents that ultimately led to it all happening. But at the same time, we were writing good material, right? It's you can't have one without the other. You can write good material and get nowhere because you don't get a lucky break, and that's unfortunate.
Right.
But I think if you push hard enough and you write enough good material, eventually you'll get that break, I think.
Yeah. A few questions for you. Everyone, keep in mind, Paul, we're just getting his feet wet here. Hopefully he'll come back for more. But Lockwatcher said, Paul, do you recall, this happened before you guys showed up, do you recall what the impetus was for the Wizard of Oz references?
No, I think somebody was just a fan. I don't know. Was it Brad's idea? I don't know where that started. I think it might have just been Brad. Just a kind of funny thing that Brad wanted to do. I actually don't know.
Okay, that's fair. General Maximus, are there any of the stories that you guys told over the 3 series that you would have liked to have developed further, given the chance? Particularly, like in season 5, we reintroduced the Asgard. They're the aliens from the alternate reality, the gray aliens with the big red light on their heads, that we see in the time shift. There was a lot of stuff at play there. Is there anything that
I don't really have a good answer for that, because there was just so much. Nothing really stood out to me as, I wish we had the chance to do something different with that particular thing, because we did. Most of the stuff we did, we had 10 seasons to look back and go, I really like to bring that character back or that concept back or whatever. Most of the stuff we wanted to do, we did, because we had so many seasons of television to do. So I don't really have any look back and sort of regret and I wish we'd done this, or certain episodes didn't turn out. That happened a lot, but that's just TV making. There's budget constraints. There's just stuff. Sometimes it just doesn't work the way you want it to work, and you regret it. And you think, if we maybe had a little bit more time or a little bit more money, or if we'd done this a little bit differently, that episode could have been a bit better. But like I said, you're feeding the pipes. You don't have time to worry about it. It's like, okay, well, maybe that wasn't the best episode we ever wrote. First of all, you don't know what people are going to like and they're not going to like.
Correct.
This is I've said this before and I'll say it again. I mean, anybody in the business who pretends, everybody pretends. They all pretend like they know. Every broadcaster pretends like they know. Every studio. We know what our audience like. And I'm like, do you? Because if you did, no show would ever get canceled. You can have an idea of some of the basic building blocks of good television, but there's weird stuff like I said, there's a weird alchemy that happens that it's really hard to pinpoint. And a lot of it has to do with casting, just getting the right people in the right. I mean, I maintain that Friends, one of the most successful television shows of all time. If you read Friends, a typical episode of Friends, it'd be like, it's kind of funny. But it was the chemistry between those actors
Correct.
that made that show, that was lightning in a bottle. They just had something, and it's a perfect example of this, what I'm talking about, because you can write all these great scripts and have all these great ideas, but weird things have to come together to make it work. And what was my original point was, some of the stuff that I think is necessary to make something work, other people don't necessarily have that same thing. So certain episodes that I thought were not that great, people love. So I don't have, so it's like you do your best, you hope for the best. And like I said, you don't have a lot of time to worry about it. You look back afterwards and say, okay, I wish that's had happened and I wish that had happened. But I don't have a lot of that for Stargate. I don't have a lot of, I wish something else had happened. I'm pretty happy with the way Stargate turned out overall.
And some things happened beforehand that fans love. You guys come and look at that and like, that's not, I'm grateful that you love it, but it's not exactly what we meant. Like Rob Cooper, we talked about Aris Boch. Now, for you and I know, for production side of things, there were a number of things that were in play there that were complicated, that don't need to be discussed. But it went on to create Vala. Like the seeds of the chemistry that ultimately became Vala grew out of a lot of those bounty hunter elements that came before. Yeah. Well, that. I mean, like I said, that's part of the luxury of doing so many episodes, right? So you have time to, and again, didn't know we were going to do that in advance, but as you're going through it and you're like, okay, you're trying new things, and well, okay, we could do a slightly different version of something that we tried before and make it better. Again, it's just, so Vala is just Claudia, right? Like correct. It's just, we got this perfect person to play this part. You cast another actress in that part and it doesn't work. Maybe it does, I don't know, but it would have been different.
Yeah, it's just this weird, like I said, casting is a huge part of it. Like you get the right people to kind of pop into these. And again, that was a luxury of having season after season, because you could see who popped, right? Yeah. And if you saw somebody pop, it's like, well, we got to bring that person back. Of course. Right. And then eventually she became a regular on the show. That's how much she popped, right? So for us, that's, now for every Vala, there's other guest stars who we just go, that was okay, but we're moving on. Right. But we just had so many opportunities that the ones that really clicked really pushed the show even further. There
were a lot of people who were on the fence about it. I mean, she's saucy, but she's vulnerable. And,
I loved her performances. I loved them.
Just extraordinary.
Yeah. I thought she was a great addition to the show.
Any chance at pitching Stargate for Amazon if and when the new series gets off the ground? You might take a stab at pitching a story or two for him, you think?
I doubt they'd want to hear pitches from me. I doubt. I would seriously doubt it. I've aged out of the television business. I hate to say it. They don't want pitches from. I mean, like Brad's different because he created, co-created the show. He's in a unique position, but I don't think they would want to hear pitches from me.
Well, I would. I'd love to hear what you had to say, mainly because we've had so much time, and you've grown as a person, and I don't think your Stargate stories are done. Yeah, that's that's right in here. So, Paul, this has been great. And
I've had a good time.
I really thank you for coming in, and I'd love to invite you back, in the next couple 3 months ahead, if you would like to talk again with us.
Okay, can I show you one thing though?
Please.
I wanted to show you this. We're going over your time here.
Okay.
I don't.
No, it's fine. It's your time.
Because I wanted to show this to you the last time we were on together, and I had Joseph with me, but I'm going to do it now. So I don't have a lot of Stargate souvenirs. In fact, I have nothing. I have almost nothing. I have my ball shirt, which I wore last time, which is getting kind of old. I can't wear it too often because it's wearing out. But this is quite precious to me. This, I don't know if you guys can see this.
A little higher.
So this.
And back. Pull it back.
So this.
What is that?
This is it says Stargate Atlantis. It's a notepad. It's got my name on it. We got these. We were given these they were just stationary. But I don't know if you can read the very bottom. It says,
Paul Mullie.
It says Inquisition 052708. So those keen-eyed fans out there will remember Inquisition was a episode of Atlantis. It was a clip show, I believe. I think it was a clip show. We're being put on trial for all the damage we've done in the Pegasus.
Robert Picardo.
Yeah. So this is me. This is what happened while I was on a notes call with the network for this episode. Speaking for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, trying to defend. Now it's a clip show. So look, I know that people don't love clip shows. I'm not an idiot, but they're a necessary evil sometimes. And you try to make them as good as you can. And so I was fending off, let's say, some criticisms from the network. And this was Joe's contribution. This is what he did during the meeting. We were on the phone, obviously. They weren't in the room with us. They were in LA. He doodled this while I did all the talking. This was his contribution. And there's a lot going on here. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but there's some weird, like this frog in particular who seems to have given up. He's jumped from a large height. He looks very sad. He kind of represents me, I think, in that meeting as I'm like trying to. Anyway, I don't know why there's armies of ants. They seem to be serving these bug overlords. I'm not sure they're attacking this.
I think they're defending the dandelion.
Yeah,
like taking it or something.
Somebody needs to analyze this because it says a lot about the inner workings of Joseph Malazzi's mind. It also says that I did all the work in that particular meeting, but I've kept it all these years. It's on my bulletin board in my office, and I noticed it before the last time we were coming on. I was like, I got to show people this, but I never got around to it. So that's it. That's like that and my ball shirt. That's about all I got. In terms of Stargate souvenirs, but that one I'll keep forever.
That's funny. It's like the dynamic of that relationship at that point, because you were executive producer. Both so of you guys at this point. Could have done some. That's what I'm saying. You're both executive producers, and he got this lovely work of art out while you were taking network notes.
I think he even signed it. There's a little squiggly line at the bottom, and Joe's signature. I don't know if you've ever seen his signature, but it's
pretty crazy.
It's essentially just a squiggly line. I can remember we used to sign a whole bunch of documents, and by the end he would literally just I'm like, come on, you got to put a little bit more effort into it than that. That's not a signature. But yeah, that thing I cherish that. It's just I look at it and I go, what is going on inside that person's mind? I don't know. I do know that he's not helping me deal with the network now. I know that. But anyway, yeah.
Did you have to respond to each of those? Was that the procedure, or was it just like, oh, okay, we'll look into that?
Oh, it's every network notes call is a little fun experience for a showrunner where they're never happy. They're never completely happy, right? Especially with a clip show, and who can blame them? But at the same point, at the same time, it's like, well, we need to do this because we need to save money so that we can do these big episodes that you love so much. So, and we're trying our best to make it not be a crappy clip show. The key to a clip show is to have a frame that actually has some story value. Even though you're rehashing old material to save money, you still need an original story there, and so I don't remember a lot of the conversation. Honestly, I don't remember too much about notes calls. I do remember they can be a little bit adversarial and a little bit difficult sometimes. I do remember one time Brad, back when he was show running, I think this was an SG-1 script call, where he literally almost climbed out his window. The window of his office. We were on the call, and he was like, "That's it. I'm opening. I'm done." Like the frog. He had enough, and he was halfway out the window. He was like, "I can't take it anymore." So
I hope they were on mute.
Yeah. Well, they couldn't see him. They couldn't
right.
see him, that he was. No, I don't think anyone said, "Oh, by the way, Brad's climbing out the window right now."
He's escaping.
I'll never forget it though. He was halfway out the window. He was like, "I can't take it anymore." But it's a creative process where you're collaborating with people, right? And you may not necessarily agree on everything, and they've got a slightly different agenda maybe than what yours is.
Yeah.
And you try to make it work.
Yep.
Apparently,
what you can.
I've heard stories about people. I've heard stories about people having. I think on Battlestar Galactica, they used to have screaming matches at each other about stuff. I heard that somewhere. I don't know if it's true. Maybe I'm speaking out of school.
With the network or with each other?
Yeah, with sci-fi. They have their battles. It's normal. It's a normal part of the process. Obviously, you want to get along, and you want everyone to agree, but you're not going to about everything. And you fight for some stuff, and you let other stuff go, you know, like sometimes you're like, okay, fine, we'll do that. We don't really like it, but you guys want it and we'll do it. And other times you're like, no, this is what we're doing. And, you know, this is what we're doing. We all agree, and we want, all of us on this end agree, and this is what we want to do. And they push and you push, and you find a common ground somewhere in the middle. It's part of the process. So, but I just remember that one in particular because I happen to have that souvenir from it. I wish he'd done that for all of them, to be honest with you, but that one's pretty.
That's pretty cute. Yeah. A whole series of
Joseph,
for every network meeting.
Who knew he was such a visual artist, right? Like, who knew?
It's really cool.
Yeah,
absolutely. He has a thing for insects. Paul, exactly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'd love to have you back next year.
All right.
All right. I appreciate your time, and you have a great holiday, sir. And I'm going to wrap up the show on this side.
Okay.
Be well. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Paul Mullie, writer and executive producer, Stargate SG-1, Atlantis and Universe. Hell of a guy. I am so thankful to have these creatives on because they have so many stories to tell from all of their years of doing this. It's just extraordinary the amount of content that they have, and you just have to prompt them, and you get the answers. But it's a lot of work going through this content. Gate Gabber, will Paul let us do a Dial the Gate T-shirt of that drawing? Oh gosh, that would be funny. I don't know. I'd have to get like permission from Joe or something with like proceeds going somewhere. We'd have to do something like that. That would be interesting though. What I do need to do is take the ball logo and put it on a black polo shirt and put that in the Dial the Gate store. I think that those would go particularly well. I certainly would like one. It wouldn't be stitching, but it would be printed on a black polo. So that may be able to happen, but for sure, I'd like to get a closer look at that drawing. That's really cute. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. Thanks again to Paul Mullie for making this episode happen. To Linda Fury, Gate Gabber, my producer, my moderating team, Summer and Tracy, Jeremy Rees, Anthony Keith, Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web for keeping Dial the Gate going. Dialthegate.com. We have next. Let me see here. We have scheduled, there's our merch store. Next week, we have a pre-recorded episode with Robert C. Cooper. There is a video right now on the Dial the Gate YouTube videos page where you can add a comment to ask a question of his. That's going to be going to him. That's actually right here. You can submit your questions to him. And we will be asking those questions. I think my interview with him is on Tuesday. So is it Tuesday? It's Tuesday. Yeah. So be sure to get us any questions that you might have for Robert by end of day U.S. time on Monday night. So, and I will be sure to have those contributed as well. We won't be able to get to every question, but we should be able to get to a few of them. I think that is what we have here. I'm always missing something and terrified that I'm going to do so. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions for Paul. Wasn't able to get to all of them, but you're continuing to help Dial the Gate grow and keep us going. We have next week after Robert Cooper, we have trivia. And you're going to want to tune in for that. That's going to be a pretty big show because we're unveiling something really cool. Something to do with the AI imagery that everyone has been playing with. And I will say no more on that. But in addition to that, we're going to be shaking up trivia in a couple of different ways. So it's going to be an exciting episode. And then we're on break for the rest of the year, and we'll be back swinging in January. I appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a like, share this with a Stargate friend, and subscribe for more entertainment. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I'll see you on the other side.
Good show. Yeah. Awesome. He was very open today and nice. Yes. Good deal. Hope you'll come Yeah. Oh, heck yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. I didn't either. I didn't either. Wow. That's pretty good. I like it. That's pretty cool. That was good. That was some good info. And just